So, how's it going, everyone? Mufara here. Apologies for this. Welcome to Heliopolis Radio. We're back at it again with another episode of the podcast interviews, and I'm actually fortunate to be joined by Brenden Kumarasamy. He's the CEO and founder of Master Talk, and the essential mission is to help purpose-driven entrepreneurs communicate their ideas more effectively in the world. And so you can actually follow him on his YouTube channel, Master Talk, which has over 30,000 subscribers. So congratulations to you, Brenden, on that one. He's also worked with many executives from companies such as Salesforce, Amazon, Deloitte, and Morgan Stanley. So he's very well experienced in what he does. And so, yeah, Brenden, I'd like to extend it over to you. Tell us a bit about yourself. What's your educational background? And what put you on this journey of speechcraft?
For sure, Mufaro. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be on the show. So for me, the journey started when I was in university, in college. I studied the opposite of what I do today, funny enough. I have a bachelor's degree in accounting. I always thought I was going to be a numbers guy. So that's what I studied. But then in business school, I started competing, Mufaro, in these things called case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So while other guys my age were playing, football or rugby or baseball or basketball, I wasn't one of those guys. I did presentations competitively, and that's how I learned how to speak. Then as I got older, Mufaro, I started coaching a lot of the students in college on how to communicate because I wanted them to win those competitions too. And I accidentally developed a talent in communication coaching. So that gave me the idea for Master Talk because I realized that all the information that was available online on public speaking communication wasn't really that good. So I just started making videos, and here we are a few years later.
And would you say that you are happy with the transition you made? Because accounting, I think in today's society, it's kind of one of those things that everyone's pushing towards. And funny enough, I know that you are actually from Montreal, Canada. So I actually lived in Vancouver, British Columbia for about 5 years. I went to SFU that side. I don't know if you know Simon Fraser University. So obviously, I actually ended up dropping out. There's a whole story there in of itself. But the Canadian experience is definitely one where you can tell that if you can communicate effectively, you can navigate pretty well through almost any situation that side.
Well said, Mufaro. First of all, that's so cool that you went to Vancouver. I think my next question would be, why in the world did you move back to South Africa? So that's interesting.
COVID happened, rental prices happened. It was just a really difficult space to be in during COVID, and so it just made sense for me to make the move back home. My family's here, and I think it was much more convenient for me just to finish everything online, which it was anyway. And so that was basically what kind of promoted me to move back to South Africa. There are a lot of challenges this side, I won't even lie, more specifically economically. But I was brought up here, so I guess for me the adjustment isn't so steep. Maybe someone who was born and raised in Canada, then this will be a very difficult transition for them to make. But for me, it was almost instinctive. It was natural, and it's home after all.
Really interesting, man.
Yeah, and so I just wanted to ask. So you developed Master Talk, and what was the process behind making it? Did you have any partners that you worked with in developing it? And also, why Speechcraft? Did you tailor make specific programs to cater towards people from kind of different spheres of the working world, or not necessarily the working world, but there are many facets of society. So yeah, just kind of give us a bit of insight into the development behind the program.
Right, Mufar. I wish I was as smart as you are in the development of it. I was really naive when I started Master Talk. I was 22 years old. I started coaching students when I was 19. But for the first 3 to 4 years, I wasn't charging anyone anything. I didn't even know it was a business. So what happened was I transitioned from being an accountant because I IBM as a technology consultant, and it was well better paid. It was more interesting work. So I thought I was just going to stay there most of my life, just be an executive there. That was my goal. But what happened, Mufaro, is in my last semester of my education in university, right before I started working at the company, probably 4 months, somebody gave me the most important question I never asked myself. And it was one of the 60 people I had coached for free on how to communicate over the last 3 years. And the question was, Brenden, how did you learn how to speak?
Mhm.
And I just went, what do you mean? It's like, well, did you do Toastmasters? Did you hire a coach? Like, you're so good at speaking. Like, how did you do that? And I looked at him and I was confused. I was like, what do you mean YouTube videos? I don't watch any of that stuff. I was self-taught. Like, I just coached all of you and I coached myself in the like, I just thought it was obvious. And then he looked really confused and he said, I think you should look into YouTube. So I had 4 months to kill before I started working at the company.
Mhm.
So I sat down on my computer, and it was December 2018 at this point, and I just started watching a bunch of videos from PhDs and people who are already creating content on public speaking, who are now my friends, but at the time they were kind of my enemies because I was kind of a young buck on the rise, I guess.
Yeah.
And I'd look at all their videos, and I was frankly disgusted. I was like, oh my god, this is so bad. Not because I had no education in communication, Mufaro. I would just
Yeah.
look at all of these videos and I would say, none of this is practical.
Yeah.
And nobody, let's say in a South Africa or a Nigeria or a Cambodia, a lot of people in these countries can't afford thousands of US dollars for like a speech coach. So I saw a big gap in the market, but I never wanted it to be a business. So I just started making videos out of the naivete that I could do it better in my mom's basement, which is right in front of me, right there in that couch. And then 9 months later, I just got really lucky. I met my business partner, who's 20 years older than me. And he's the one who said, hey, you could charge executives a lot of money to work with you. And I built a business in the back end that I ended up going full time on.
Full time on it. And so, I mean, without obviously divulging too much, would you be kind enough to share the clientele that you work with, kind of how the process works? I mean, when people hear executives from IBM and Morgan Stanley, obviously a lot of people are like, wow, okay, so who have you worked with? And, you know, you don't even have to go into detail with who, but kind of how has that experience been working with people from high positions in companies such as those?
For sure, I'm the most open person you'll ever meet in your life, so you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
So here's what I'll say on that topic. You know, at the beginning, I never thought I would get to executives this quickly, right? Because I'm currently 26 years old, but my average client is 20 years older than I am. So
Must be
how
difficult. Yeah,
right?
that's
So how did that
steep.
even? Yeah, so part of it was luck, but obviously a lot of it was skill too, because I feel a lot of speech coaches aren't that good. So I was able to circumvent the industry pretty quickly. But let me kind of give you the idea. In business, how you want to think about it, because it's very different than being an employee, is you need to ask yourself not the question, is anyone going to buy from me? Because there's always people who buy things from anybody. But
Yeah.
more ask yourself, who is the person that is most likely to buy from me? Like, to think about JP Morgan, I would never go to the CEO of JP Morgan, who's a white male, and go, hey, you should work with me. He's going to laugh me out of the room. He's going to say, really, kid? Like, get out of here. I make like $50 million a year. I don't need you. So he's the wrong person. You don't want to sell people who don't want to be sold, Mufaro. It's kind of like going to a gym and selling cupcakes. How stupid is that? Like, everyone is trying to
On
be
a cheat
fit.
no, but on a cheat meal day, people will buy those cupcakes. That's your
Right.
niche.
Fair enough, but you get where I'm going, right?
Yeah,
Like,
no, I get
people
you. I get you.
help- fair counter, but you know what I'm saying. But that's the key, right?
Yeah.
So for me, what happened, Mufaro, was the way that I got my first executive clients was through Vamsi, my business partner. So he just introduced me to his coaching clients because he's a high performance coach and he's also my coach.
Okay. Yeah.
And he just trusted me. So a lot of my clients came there first. But obviously my problem isn't coaching. My problem is getting people to buy the coaching package. So when I started coaching them, all of these older, like brown technology professionals were like, whoa, this kid's really good. Like, I got promoted and I made more money. So they started referring people to me, right? And I just started developing niches. Like, my biggest niche right now is the executive woman, right? Somebody who's a vice president. So not necessarily C-level. There's some
Yeah.
C-levels, but it's mostly the VP. Because the VP is the person who's hungry. They're like, I want to be the CEO. I
Yeah,
want to do
they've got
whatever."
that 100%. Agreed.
Yeah. And that market, Mufaro, they've already invested in speech coaches, but they haven't gotten the result because they weren't good. So when they get to me, they go, hey, I heard my girlfriends told me you're really good and that you worked with them. So even if they're in their 40s, they'll hire me and they'll get the result.
Incredible stuff. And I like the way that, you know, there's a strong element of confidence in your ability and the way you've developed your workshops and programs. And that's actually what I was going to move into. So how does your program work? I mean, there are a whole variety of different clientele that you could work with. I mean, you have economics, you have business, you have politics, you have arts, you have medicine. Do you have specific programs tailor-made for people in different spheres? Because I know, the nature of jargon used in different industries, there's a different way of speaking, so there's a conversation that doctors will have, and there's a conversation that, business executives will have. And so I was just wondering if you could just describe your programs and if they had any diversity in terms of that.
Great question, Mufaro. So what I found from experience in coaching execs, and because I've coached different pockets, like a couple of the ones you mentioned, doctors for sure, executives, but you know what I've learned is that all of it is the same principles that I'm sure we'll cover later in this interview. But it's the same set of things. So I don't really have different programs for different niches. But what I did realize, to your question, is there's a very big difference. And this is something I learned in business. You learn by doing. There's a very big difference between the person who's going to spend 5 hours watching all of my YouTube videos and the person who actually buys my service. So my YouTube channel is really for the world. So let's say there is an 8-year-old kid in South Africa. That person who wants to get really good or is 15 years old, they'll watch all my YouTube videos for speaking, right? They have a keen interest in it.
Yes.
But the person who buys my service, Mufaro, has no interest in watching my YouTube videos. They just watch one or two for credibility. Oh, okay, this kid's like well known, he's done really well, his videos are nice, but I don't want to waste my time watching. I just want to hire him directly because I just want him to be my personal trainer, and they'll just pay more money for it. So then what ended up happening, going to your niches, I had that mentality too. Oh, I should do one for arts, one for this. But you know what the real answer is, before? You wait to see who's interested in the service, and then you figure out later why they're actually paying you. So if you had told me at the beginning of the business, like, what's your clientele? I wouldn't have been able to tell you. I'd been like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know who's willing to pay. But I realized later, like, for example, let's take medicine. Yeah, do a lot of those doctors need help? Yeah. Do they have a lot of money for it? Absolutely. Yeah. Do they want the service? No. A lot of them don't actually put in the time. They don't care. Whereas, like, the executive woman who wants to get promoted, absolutely they care, because they're getting compared to men all the time. So the pain is much higher. CEO of a business, if you know how to communicate, you're done. Like, you're smoked. You can't you can't scale. So those are some examples of people. So I found out later who has the most pain, and now I'm retargeting towards those niches.
Good stuff, man. And you speak French and Tamil, and I don't want to be ignorant, but am I assuming Tamil is your native language? So
you got it.
All right, thank you. And so each language has a different kind of a different persona, if I could put it that way. So there's a way that French people would conduct a public speech, and there's a way that someone who speaks Tamil will conduct a public speech. And so how do you kind of find the balance between transitioning in different types of personalities that, each language embodies? I don't know if that's a bit poetic or philosophical, but yeah.
No, that's a great question. I've never been asked that, actually. So let me be transparent. I definitely don't keynote in French. I don't keynote in Tamil. I keynote in French. Yes. But I've done one or two podcasts in Tamil. It went well. Yeah. Like, my community understood it, but man, it was a hustle. So here's what I'll say. Let me start from a place of empathy.
Yeah.
That's part of that. Your question is actually what prompted Master Talk in the first place. Doing some research, and I have the answer, is nobody had created a video on how to present in a second language. I think I'm the first one because I speak 3, like many immigrants. Well, I'm not technically an immigrant because I was born in Canada, but my parents were. So the answer is actually the following: whenever you're presenting, and then I'll comment on the specific languages that I speak, is 3 things. 1, whenever you're doing a presentation where English is often somebody's second language, you want to write it in your first language first. Whether it's Creole, whether it's Hindi, whether it's Mandarin, it doesn't matter what the language is. Yeah. Just write it in your first language because you understand the culture and the vocabulary of that language. That's step 1. Step 2 is translate that speech into English. And then the third piece is present that presentation to English native speakers. So that way they'll correct any vocabulary and grammar mistakes you make.
Yeah.
And then you're perfect. correct. So for me, to answer your direct question, you're right. When I switch languages, I used to have a lot of trouble, especially in French, because I keynote in French quite a bit, maybe 10% of the time, 5% of the time. So in those situations, I struggle a lot, but because I followed that framework, it became a lot easier. But my tones and my technique is very similar, though.
Okay. So you maintain the same energy and enthusiasm and vigor as you do in French. I was going to ask maybe for a sample, but no one here would understand the French anyway, so we'll skip out on that part.
Sure.
But then I know this is kind of, so you have your YouTube channel, obviously. So for those of you who do want to actually understand some of the techniques that Brenden employs to help you improve your speech, you can actually check out the YouTube channel. But again, for podcast purposes, I do have to ask, what are your main recommendations? You already mentioned one for people who aren't native in speaking English to better improve their communication skills. One thing I've noticed is that, like you said, the translation, the grammar, also just the tone and the confusion that kind of happens between switching. I don't know, like words carry different value in different language systems. So the way you say hello, it actually carries a much more deeper meaning in the language. So it's just translating it to English where it's a bit more simpler, to put it like in a weird way. What are the recommendations for people to kind of bypass those issues between transitioning between their native and English?
For sure, Mufaro. And let's simplify this. That this is part of the reason why I thought I had ideas that had legs. Because a lot of people, we always try to overcomplicate things in communication teaching. Yeah. Like if you watch videos from PhDs, they go, this is how you communicate in this specific instance, but nobody implements anything. So how do we actually get better tomorrow? Here's my frame. Communication is like juggling 18 balls at the same time. So one of those balls is eye contact, one of them is smiling, one of them is vocal tone, expressions, body language, storytelling, and the list goes on. But it gets overwhelming really quickly. So if you try and do all of those balls, they all fall to the ground. So for me, the question has always been, what are the 3 easiest balls to juggle in the air? Because if I just juggle those, I'll be a lot better at communication. So let's go into those 3 balls. I call them my easy 3s. So number 1 is the random word exercise. Pick a random word, like light bulb, like wife, like ceiling, like trophy, like phone, and create random presentations out of thin air. There's 2 reasons why this is important. 1, because life is filled with uncertainty, Mufara. So if you're able to deal with uncertainty, you'll get the result, because life is all about that. And the second piece is if you can make sense out of nonsense, you could make sense out of anything. Like if you talk about avocados, you can talk about anything. So that's the random word exercise.
If you weren't teaching Master Talk, you could be a yogi. Pretty philosopher. Like that was pretty deep what you said there. It was pretty intense. That's pretty sound life advice. You can very applicable to today's world, 100%. So I will continue.
Absolutely. So that's the first one, right? You could do this with your friends, you could do this with your family, you could do this in the shower. Like, just do 5 random words a day, 5 presentations, it'll only take 5 minutes, and just do that every day for a year, or a month, or a week. That's one. The second exercise, Mufaro, is the question drill. We get asked questions all the time in our life, but most of us are reactive to those questions. We're not proactive. We wait for the question to come, and then we go, I'm not really sure. Instead of being proactive to say, wait a second, here's my answer. I'll give you a fun example with me. I remember when I started guesting on podcasts, I sucked at this. I was so bad. I remember some guy asked me, he was like, where does the fear of communication come from? And I looked at him and I was like, I don't know, man, Johannesburg, Los Angeles, London, I don't know. Right, so I was lost. I didn't know the answer. So here's how I fixed it, Mufaro. Every day for 5 minutes. That's it. Every day, 5 minutes. I answered one question that I thought the world would ask me about my expertise. Every single day. Until I had an answer for everything. But if you spend 5 minutes a day for a year answering one question a day, you'll have answered 365 questions about your industry. You'll be bulletproof.
Wow. So no, actually, I think that's what actually really is most effective in selling, not selling anything, but of giving any type of service, is to simplify the process so that it's not complicated in a lot of people's heads. And I agree, over time, the simple practice of these things that you mentioned, they actually contribute to your vocabulary and just your confidence in actually being able to converse and dialogue and engage in dialogue with certain people. And so I was actually going to ask you, what is the one instance where communication has like really been essential and has actually been, I don't want to say life-saving, but it's really helped you in a way that if you didn't have the ability to communicate, you'd have been screwed?
100%. I mean, I think the best example is getting my job opportunities that I got. I was really fortunate. I landed two great companies out of university, PricewaterhouseCoopers and IBM. And I can tell you for a fact, Mufaro, I would not have gotten those jobs if I wasn't a great communicator. The reason I even did case competitions in the first place, that bizarre thing that, the professional sports for nerds, was to get a job primarily. Because most people in business school don't know how to communicate well. So what these big companies do, like Amazon or Google, is they actually sponsor these competitions. They bring their executives, they give problem statements related to their companies, and they watch students present. And it's through those trial by fires that they pick the best students and they recruit them into their companies. Pretty simple, right? That's the idea. So for somebody who's doing case competitions, if you don't communicate well, you lose out on all of those opportunities. So for me, it was really do or die. So I really focused on making sure that I would do well and I got those job opportunities. Same thing with my business. I mean, my business is literally essential. If I don't know how to communicate well, why would anyone hire me?
No.
Right? There's that. And obviously the YouTube channel would have sucked pretty badly.
No, yeah, actually, I'll be honest with you. And so I checked out the YouTube videos, and the actually last one I watched was how to manage time. I was actually pretty afraid to have this interview. I was like, damn, I say 90% of the time. How am I even gonna communicate with this guy? People will probably pick up like, yeah, man, they're worlds apart in terms of how they conduct their speech, but it's incredible. And I do recommend that you guys actually go on the channel and check out the content. It'll be very useful and it's free. And so I was actually going to ask you, in terms of starting this venture, I know nothing is ever perfect. I mean, yes, things align, you have your capability. Speaking well obviously gets you through the door, but there are definitely ups and downs. So I was just maybe wanting to ask you, what were some of the struggles that you kind of encountered when you started Master Talk? Also, partnerships are always not easy because, those are two different ideas, two different personalities, and they kind of have to mesh together to work things out moving forward. And also clients aren't particularly easy, especially in your realm. People have expectations. And if they're executives, then probably the standard is much, much higher than the average person. So yeah, what are some of the highs and lows that you've experienced, and how did you overcome them as well?
For sure. And that's what's interesting about entrepreneurship as far as your highs are really high and your lows are really low. So there's never really a middle. So here's what I'll say. Let me start with the positive. I got really lucky with my business partner. I usually don't do well in partnerships. I'm very aggressive. I have a very aggressive work ethic. So if somebody doesn't outwork me, I don't value them. I respect them. Vamsi was very different. I literally would not be the human being or the business owner that I am today because I had a lot of imposter syndrome and anxiety around coaching execs, and he trained all of that out of me. So if or most of it anyways. So if I wasn't there, I just wouldn't be as successful. So I got lucky with my business partner. We rarely fight. I don't remember the last time we had an argument. We're just always aligned. I think I must have done something well in a past life. Maybe life is giving me a gift this lifetime. I don't know what Bob says. So I'll take it. I will take it. In terms of the ups and downs, I mean a lot. I'll give you the biggest one. Quitting my job was the hardest decision of my life, Mufaro. There's no doubt about it. I quit in June 2021, so it was probably like 18 months ago as of this recording. And the reason it was really tough for me was because I'd literally wrapped around all of my identity in getting that job. Like I was the guy. I was the IBM consultant, 6-figure salary. Like I was going to be a pretty wealthy guy if I'd worked there like 7 more years. And in 7 more years, I'd only be like, 31 or something, 32. So I would have had a pretty good life. Obviously, I would have worked like a dog to get there, but I had a pretty good like financial life. My parents were factory workers, right? So this is like a massive outcome. I'd retired my mother even on my salary. That's why we all still live together, so I can take care of her and whatnot. But I think the point is, quitting my job was really stressful because I was, and I still am until like September in like 8 months. Then I won't be. But as of now, I am the only breadwinner in the family. Like I provide for my mom and my sister. So quitting my day job was super stressful, dude. Like really stressful. So obviously, I prepared for it. I had a 9-month emergency fund. I had replaced some of my income already through coaching, and I had a clear game plan on how to replace all of it. And I made it work last year. Last year was actually really stressful for me. Even if I have a very successful YouTube channel, you would think, oh, the guy's making like $10 million a year. He must be like a superstar. Yeah, no, those subscribers do not convert into clients. You have to you have to be able to build the book. And I was able to make it work. You know, things worked out fine for me because I busted my ass off. But I think the point I want to drive is every single thing that you do will always have obstacles. That's why the best founders, I think, as Gary Tan says best, Mufaro, they're pessimistic short term, optimistic long term. What does that mean? So they're pessimistic about the day to day. Oh, the worst case scenario. Oh my God, this will mess up. My client might fire me. All this stuff, but long term. That means like, hey, if I do this for 5 more years, I'll be okay. And that's kind of the mindset. And for clients, I actually don't worry too much about that because in coaching, it's a very high margin business. You keep most of the money. You don't have employees. So I just fire the people I don't like. So that solved out pretty quickly.
I have to say, three key things that just spoke to me there is really is your discipline and kind of your mental resolve and foresight and maturity. Not being too deep into it, but I can tell you're a hard worker. Behind every pleasant demeanor, behind everyone who cracks a joke, there's a serious worker. There's a certain level of focus, and it kind of emanates in just kind of how you conduct yourself, how you've established your business, and also the foresight. I mean, look, you always have a plan, not for the worst, but your mind is open to adapting and making adjustments where it's needed. So yeah, no, I mean, I have my utmost respect for that. And I think a lot of people can draw inspiration from it. Seriously, like it's really important to develop that type of mindset, especially once you're going into the realm of entrepreneurship. And you actually answered my next question, is what are your words of encouragement for someone who was trying to go into the realm of maybe becoming a communication coach or even whatever sphere of business they'd want to? But I guess you kind of summed it up there in what you said.
No, I can jump in with that. I think that's it. First of all, thanks for the kind words, man. I really appreciate it. For your next question, though, I'll give you something different, which is 2 parts, right? One is coaching, one is business. So coaching is really simple. Because this business, it's really easy to see if you like it or not. Yeah. And the test is coach people for free and see if you like it. That's it. That's all you have to do. Forget about making money. Like I coach probably 70 people for free and that's why I became such a dangerous entrepreneur in the coaching industry, because I was so good so young, right? There is nobody on the planet currently that I know of who's 26 years old and has 7 years of experience in this field. It's literally insane. But the reason is because I love it so much. Like this conversation, I'm not thinking to myself, oh my God, when is this going to be over? I'm like, wow, before is so good. Like he's asking such great questions.
Oh man. Yeah, no.
I genuinely enjoy this. So if you don't like people, you don't like talking. I'm not saying you need to like everybody. I don't like everybody. But if you love conversations, you love transformation, and you're willing to do it for free, like I don't get paid to be on podcasts, right? Yeah. You're going to be successful in coaching. But the opposite is also true. If you can't do it for free, there's no way you can get paid. That's the advice for coaches. Yeah. For business is very different. I have a very jaded point of view about this because I always like to keep in mind that I'm always talking to the majority of people, not the minority whenever I'm on a podcast. So my advice is always never start a business. My advice is get a high-paying job. That's what I start with. I call it side hustle comfortably. I hate the image that Gary Vaynerchuk paints all the time. Even if I love him to shreds, I hate the image. You're like 5 other people. You're eating beans out of a pot. I was like, dude, we don't need to live that life. All you got to do is find a job that you're really good at, that you can get paid good money. And it doesn't need to be in corporate. For me, it was. But for somebody else listening to this, it could be being a plumber. Nobody wants to do that job. You get paid way more money. So get the job first, And then after, try a bunch of ideas in business, and then if one of them works, then do business. But you need an unfair advantage to win, or else you're screwed in business.
So I was smoking there because I was trying to see if I could mimic Gary's accent. Like, 3 hustles, guys. Simple things. You go on Amazon, Facebook ads. Come on, guys, hustle. I mean, I had a 40. You know what? You're all 20 years old. You have your life on. No, man. But actually, you're actually the first person I've interviewed, because I also interviewed another an entrepreneur, and you're the first person that actually mentioned getting a job first and building a side hustle. Most people kind of have that go in, all in or nothing type attitude. And the fact that you mentioned set yourself up, build, and then let go of your leverage when the time's right. So yeah, really, really good on that one.
100%, man. Like, here's the way I think about it. If you can't build a 6-month savings, you shouldn't be an entrepreneur, because you don't have the discipline to understand money. So if you don't know how to leverage capital, why did I live at my mother's house my whole life? Because I told my mom, my sister, I was like, look, I make good money now, but it's like, why should we pay for 3 mortgages? I could just leverage that capital and triple my media budget. And now we're on TikTok and Instagram. And so other people can make these decisions, Mufaro. They could say, yeah, I'll just live at home, $1,000 a month in let's say Canada for rent. Vancouver, it's probably like $10,000.
Oh man, and you're asking why I left.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, if you moved to Montreal instead of Vancouver, you would have stayed in Canada. But the point is like $1,000 a month. I could have a $12,000 media budget. Why do I need to? So that's the way of the entrepreneur. Whereas most people are like, well, I want freedom, I want independence. And those people, they'll never be entrepreneurs. They'll get their ass kicked in business. You'll run out of money so quick. So yeah, get a job. That's the advice.
Oh man, and so I was just gonna ask. Obviously, based in Africa, your program. I know you predominantly get most of your clientele from North America and Europe, presumably. Do you have any means for other countries outside where English is not necessarily complete? Like, it's not necessarily the native language. Do you have any options for people coming from that type of background? Because everyone has a different income base and accessibility. So I don't know if you have any services that you provide in terms of that.
For sure, Mufaro. So I work with a lot of, they're usually US citizens. So let's say somebody from Africa, somebody from Asia, they move to America and they get a job, let's say at Facebook or something. Those people I work, because most of my clients, their English is not their first language. But of course, it's obviously been difficult now. Like, I can't, nobody can really afford me anymore unless they live in the States or Canada. So here's what I'll say. This is my mission, right? Because I want everybody to have access. That's why I came on the podcast, right? I want to share that information.
Much appreciated.
So here's what I would say for those of you who can't afford a speech coach, because hiring somebody like me you're starting at 3,000 US, right? Yeah. It's quite a bit. It's not like So what I would say is come to my free training. So I do a free workshop for the whole community every 2 weeks, and it's a live workshop that I facilitate over Zoom. So if you want to jump on that, it's rockstarcommunicator.com, and you can come to as many workshops as you want, and it's absolutely free of charge. That's the first recommendation I have. The second recommendation I have is those 3 exercises: the random word exercise, the question drill. I'll recap this. So pick a random word, give a 60-second presentation. Question drill is just pick a question every day, answer it. And the third exercise that we haven't talked about yet, that I'll mention really fast, is the video message. Just pick 3 people you love the most, open your WhatsApp, open your Facebook, and just send them quick 20-second video messages, just saying how much you love them, how much you appreciate them. And that will help you practice. So do that with each other, friends of yours who are listening to this podcast, just team up. And then the third advice I have is join a Toastmasters club. Toastmasters is very inexpensive. They have clubs across the world. I don't know how many they have in South Africa. I'm pretty sure they have a couple.
No, they have a couple, actually.
That's what I
and
thought.
It's a major thing, actually. It's really good in developing your English ability. And I think now most schools predominantly have a Toastmasters, fortunately.
That's what I thought too. I just want to, but you're the expert, not me. No. And then in South Africa.
No.
Right, because I've never been. So the third piece is to go to Toastmasters, but bring my videos to the club. So that way you have the most advanced knowledge, because I share everything for free. So you have all my advanced knowledge, but you have a community that you're practicing all of those tips with, and you'll definitely see a lot of results for sure.
And then the last question, just kind of in summary, you already mentioned rockstarcommunicator.com. Are there any other means of communication? Fortunately, in Africa, they do have a lot of people that can maybe afford a personal coach and that may be interested. Is there a way of them communicating you either through LinkedIn or maybe email? I know you also have your Instagram, which is at Master Your Talk. And so, yeah, I don't know if you have any other lines of communication that people could use to contact you.
Absolutely. You could DM me on any of my socials. I answer all of my DMs. So don't be shy to message me on Instagram. That's an easy place. And if you could figure out how to spell my name, anyone who's listening to this, you could totally message me on LinkedIn as well. So those are a couple of options. I'd say Instagram, LinkedIn. No, don't email me. Email's so hard. I get so much of that. It's tough. But if you DM me on my socials, I'll 100% answer for sure.
No stress. And so, yeah, no, Brenden, I really wanted to thank you for hopping on the show. Obviously, we're a growing podcast and we have some ways to go. But again, I think the one thing we really also share in common is just the kind of the grind mentality. You got to sit down, focus, and then work. Obviously, I was late. Shouldn't be disclosing that on a podcast, but honesty first. And so, honesty first. But no, truly, Brenden, thank you for coming on. And I hope to have you on again. And I know definitely that there are many people here in South Africa that can benefit from what you've shared in this podcast. And again, you're a unique and phenomenal individual. The way you actually have mastered speech is quite intimidating to most people. But look, it's how we grow. I think when you associate with people who have like achieved mastery in a specific field, you're naturally bound to improve. So thank you so much, Brenden, for hopping on to Heat Up This Radio. And yeah, man, we hope to have you on again.
Thanks, brother. Such a pleasure.